everybody. It's Mayor Jane Castor from the city of Tampa. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us on our Facebook Live. We have an incredible and very timely guest today that's going to talk to us about the storms in our storm season, which I know a lot of you have been watching the news and seeing that this is predicted to be one of the strongest, I guess you would say, worst storm seasons since 2005. And Brian LaMarre, our guest, we were talking about just sort of reminiscing about the 2005 hurricane season, which was incredibly active at the time. So we will be joined by the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service, Tampa Bay area. So welcome, Brian, and we'll get right back to you as soon as I give a few updates on COVID-19 situation, where we're at today. We actually have made progress. I know sometimes it's difficult to see, but we are really flattening and starting on a downward trend in the number of cases that we have here in Hillsborough County and really in the state of Florida, but most specifically in the city of Tampa and in Hillsborough County. So that is absolutely wonderful. Although the numbers are really daunting, the total number of cases for Hillsborough County is 33,198, and that includes 426 deaths. I remember we did a Facebook Live show and there were 48 deaths, and we commented about that what a large number that was, and now we're over 400, and each one of those numbers, there's a person behind each one of those numbers, someone's loved one, someone's friend or neighbor. And so we're working hard every day to try to reduce the number of deaths that we have associated with COVID-19. And really, we're blessed to live in this particular area. We've got a great medical community, and they have made a lot of advancements in the treatment of COVID-19. And so, they have kept the number of deaths reduced as well, but still any increase is too much. So in the state of Florida, we have 550,000, almost 551,000 total cases, and 8,898 deaths statewide. So that's pretty incredible. We still have the mask ordinance is still in place for Hillsborough County. As many of you know, there's been changes to the emergency policy group. The Board of County Commissioners voted to take over that responsibility, and they have meetings I believe every Thursday, or their regular meetings, but we're still there sharing all of the information. So I'm still receiving all of the updates, still in touch with the health department, testing sites, our medical personnel. So staying on top of all of that information so that I can keep you informed out in the community as well. We are also continuing, we've always got a phase on our relief programs. So we are now on phase 3 of our One Tampa. We started out with providing the relief funding to residents. Then we looked at our small businesses. The application process was a little difficult. And so we've really reduced that to the point of a 1-page application. And then you type in your business license number, and it should tell you whether you qualify or not. We gave out the first round of funding that we had available in $2,000 increments, and we had some funding left over. So we're going back again and really widening the eligibility pool for small businesses. So if you went and applied for one of these relief checks in the past and you weren't eligible, please go back to tampagov.net and put your business license in there, and you may be eligible for a $2,000 check. And in the scheme of things, you think sometimes that $2,000 may not make a difference, but I personally delivered some of those checks to some of our small businesses, and more than one person cried, so including me, but it was, it was just very touching. The individuals that are working so hard out there to keep their businesses up and running, to be able to employ other Tampa residents in their businesses, and to provide the needed services for our community. So with that, I will also encourage everyone to please shop local as well, and please, if you're not comfortable going into the restaurants, then patronize your local restaurants by getting meals delivered or takeout. So very, very important that we watch out for each other. So with talking about the restaurants, they're still working at half capacity, 50% of their allowable occupancy. And so we are continuing with our Lift Up Local and we're not closing down streets, but we're allowing establishments, restaurants, and retail, if they want to put up tents in parking lots so that they can safely host more guests. Then we're continuing that process too, even though it's in the storm season. So we're making sure any tents that go up can come down really quick as well. But again, doing everything that we can to lift up local and to help our community out. So I'd ask everybody to do the same and to think about it as well. If you haven't been personally impacted, your business hasn't been impacted, to see what you can do to go out and volunteer or make a donation as well. So also make sure that you go. I had somebody yesterday that responded to a message and said that we weren't, actually it was in reference to our office dog. We have the best office dog ever in Dessa, Al-Qadessa. And I think yesterday was like National Dog Day or something. So we put a spot about Dessa up there. And someone was somewhat critical, saying that we should be more serious and we should be providing more information on COVID-19. So if you feel like you don't have the information that you need on COVID-19, please go to tampagov.net. We have all the information, including up-to-date statistics on the number of tests that have been done, our positivity rate, which, as many of you know, was close to 14% for a while. We've got that down consistently under 10%. It was at 8 something this morning, but I think that was more of a glitch. I think it'll stay right around 10 for a little bit. So make sure you go to tampagov.net. You can get all that information. You can get information on our Lift Up Local, on One Tampa, anything that you need to know about COVID-19 and what's being done to address it. Also spoke with our school superintendent, Addison Davis, on Saturday, and we have offered our city assets to the school system, if they need to use our parks and rec facilities so that they can space kids out or allow them to engage in the e-learning. That, I just wanted him to know that we are here as a partner, and they're doing everything that they can to open the schools responsibly as well, so the kids will have a safe learning environment. So very, very important things, but go to tampagov.net. We've got all the information that you may need there. So let's introduce our guest today. I love that Brian's background, and especially after the game last night, let's all say together, go Bolts. My gosh, how many times I told Brian, I think it took a couple years off my life, that game last night. So many times the goalie for Columbus stopped just short of 90 shots on goal. But if you're not a hockey fan, I apologize. And you should be, because we have the greatest hockey team in the nation here. So anyway, background's great, Brian. So my guest today is Brian LaMarre, meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service Tampa Bay area. The office operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and Brian's probably there the majority of that time during these months, and provides weather forecast and warning services for all of West, Central, and Southwest Florida, a 15 area county area of responsibility. That's huge. Brian has been a meteorologist with the National Weather Service for over 25 years. You don't look like you're 25. Prior to his arrival in Tampa in 2007, Brian worked at the National Weather Service's office in Texas, Maryland, and Connecticut. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for taking time out of what I know is a very busy day. I get my weather updates when there's lightning in the area or expected rain. So I know you've been very, very busy the last few days. So as we have said before, the Noaa hurricane outlook was released recently. So go ahead and tell us, Brian, how bad is it?
Oh, thank you, Mayor, for having me on the show again. I know we've worked a lot over the years since you've
Yep.
been mayor, and also before when you were chief of police. So I
Yes.
really appreciate your focus on public safety for weather disasters. And as you see behind me, lightning. This is the lightning that unfortunately kills a lot of people every year.
Yes.
So it's serious. And got some hurricanes on either side of me, but. As you mentioned, the NOAA Hurricane Outlook was first issued in May and then recently was updated a couple of weeks ago. And just to really let everyone know, on average, what we see during a hurricane season, which again runs from June 1st to November 30th. So in an average year, we should see 12 storms. And out of those 12 storms, we should see about 6 hurricanes. And out of those 6 hurricanes, about 3 become major, and that's category 3, 4, or 5. We don't hope to ever get that. But in an average year, we'll see 12, 6, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can say right now that this is already a record year. 2020 definitely is not a good year by any stretch of the imagination, and the hurricane season is feeling it. Never before have we had 9 named storms before we hit the month of August.
Oh my gosh.
And we've already seen that in last month with Hurricane Isaias, which was a very powerful storm. Fortunately, did not deliver deadly impacts to Florida, but moved on up the East Coast and hit back some of my friends on up in Connecticut who just had power restored a few days ago. So again, never before happened, but the official NOAA hurricane outlook, again, remember, on average, 12, 6, and 3. So the official outlook is really looking at 23
Oh my goodness.
storms. And out of the 23, we're expecting about 9 hurricanes, and out of the 9, about 5 major. So
Oof.
the thing to remember is really about how we name these storms. Now, we use the alphabet, and we have a lot of interesting names, as we've already seen on the list this year. But the alphabet, we all know we've got 26 letters, okay? But we do not use 5 of those letters. We don't use the letters Q, U, X, Y, or Z. So that brings us to 21 letters, and we're forecasting it to be above that. And for anyone that doesn't remember the 2005 hurricane season, again, the year that Florida had Hurricane Wilma, the year that Hurricane Katrina came close to us and moved over and devastated parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Gulf Coast, that was the first year that we ever had to go to the Greek alphabet. So hopefully it doesn't happen, but again, it is forecast to be an active year. An active year does not mean that we're going to have landfalls or that Florida is going to be hit by every storm. But again, this year looks to be a very active hurricane season.
That's incredible. And there are a lot of factors that go into that. As I read the article the other day, talking about a rise in temperature of the water, just really 3/4 of a degree can make all of the difference. And then the Saharan dust that has an impact in slowing down the storm. So talk about a couple of, before I butcher them all, talk about a couple of the factors that go into making this. Why is this season anticipated to be worse than others?
Yeah, you said it right, Mary Jane. We're looking at very warm water out in the Gulf of Mexico, out in the Atlantic Ocean, and also you mentioned the Saharan Air Layer, and so that's the dust that we heard about in the news over the past few months, and we've actually seen it out there with some really brilliant sunsets that we can get in this part of the world when the African dust actually moves across from Africa over the Atlantic Ocean, and sometimes it comes into the Gulf of Mexico. But what that does actually reduces the number of storms we can get. But unfortunately, we're not seeing any dust plumes moving off right now. So we have another thing called wind shear. So wind shear is the strong winds that move across the Gulf of Mexico, move across the Caribbean Sea and over the Atlantic Ocean. And that can really disrupt a lot of the thunderstorms that form into tropical depressions, tropical storms, and hurricanes. And we can look out there right now. There's a tropical depression that formed yesterday out in the far eastern Atlantic. It's going to be getting close to the northern coast of Puerto Rico over the next day or two. But right now it's a tropical depression, but it is forecast to become a tropical storm. And that we will give another name. So we'll be moving to the letter J. It's not going to be Jane, but it's going to be Joseph.
There you go, Josephine.
Yeah, we don't
name Josephine.
Hurricane Jane out there right now, but
the
next one will be Josephine. And so it looks like that disturbance may become Tropical Storm Josephine. It does not look like it'll be a threat to Florida. It actually looks like it'll begin to weaken as it moves north of Puerto Rico. The wind shear is going to start tearing it apart, and then it's going to start moving off to the north. So that's good news for us. But again, another active season that we're looking at. So you're right, warm water temperatures, whether or not dust is out there, also La Nina and El Nino. So we're actually moving towards a La Nina, which allows us to have more storms, unfortunately. If we had El Nino, which we had a really interesting El Nino in 1992, and that year should raise the eyebrow of everyone in Florida, but that we were going into an El Nino. It was a below normal season, much below normal. We didn't even hit 10 storms, but we hit one storm, and that was the letter A. It was the end of August, and that was Hurricane Andrew, which a lot of people should remember that name in Florida or outside, did devastating impact. So it doesn't really matter if the season is expected to be active or inactive. It only takes that one storm to really change our lives forever.
Yeah, that's, I went down, I had friends whose parents lived in Homestead and went down there, and it was, I mean, literally, if they hadn't had spray painted Home Depot on the side of a building, you wouldn't have known what it was. There were trucks on top of buildings, and it was incredible. And the one thing too that has never changed are individuals who stay during a hurricane or through a storm. When it's over and they're safe, the first comment they make is, "I will never do that again." So let's talk about those predictions of where they're going to make landfall. And out of all that spaghetti, which ones you pay attention to, and you know, all of the factors that really go into how those spaghetti models are fashioned.
And it's really a good point, because a lot of people hear some of these terms on social media. Social media has been a great help for us over the years. It's also been a challenge because there's a lot of misinformation that gets put out there. And there could be computer models that we have, and we have several. And each time we project outward into the future, that's typically what forms those spaghetti models. So you see the lines kind of crossing one another and they're moving all over the place. That's typically an example of what we look at when there's one storm out there. So the spaghetti plot, if you will, is really several different projections from several different computer models that we have. And just because one may have it moving over Tampa in 2 weeks from now, doesn't mean that that's going to happen. And so there's a lot of science and technology that goes into interpreting what those computer models are doing. And it's very much like the medical field. I mean, I've gone to my cardiologist and I can look at an MRI and I may not have any idea what it says, but the cardiologists and the medical professionals can interpret that for me. And that's what we do as meteorologists. We look at all of the computer models, the artificial intelligence, and we can determine, okay, well, just because this track or this portion of the spaghetti model hasn't moved over Florida, it's not likely to happen. It's a very low probability. So we look at a lot of data. We combine that with satellite data. We have satellites out there in space about 22,300 miles above the equator, and they're always looking at the planet and taking pictures like what we see, you know, right over there, hurricane out in space. So we look at that data, and we work closely with you, Mayor Jane, and the emergency officials of Tampa and the Hillsborough County and all the counties that we're responsible for across West Central and Southwest Florida. And we make sure that they have the information that they need in order to make informed decisions, so the public is, safety is number one.
Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the preparation. You know, people tend to wait until the last minute. And so we are, as a city, we are starting to make sandbags available now. So that if individuals want to come prior to the season and check something off of their list, then those are available. So what's the the overarching message for preparedness for the hurricane season?
The best thing that we at the National Weather Service like to make sure that folks are aware of is really to make sure you have a plan. And there's a lot of resources out there. Like you were talking about the COVID resources on, the City of Tampa website. There's also hurricane information on that City of Tampa website. And you can go to weather.gov/Tampa, and that's going to be the National Weather Service page. And also FEMA and the state of Florida Division of Emergency Management. There's a lot of resources out there that can help everyone out there put together a hurricane safety kit. So that's number one. You want to make sure that you have enough supplies to last. It used to be 3 days. Now it's out to 7 days because, as we saw with the devastating impacts from Hurricanes Harvey, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Maria with Puerto Rico, and Hurricane Michael that hit Florida a few years ago, the length of time has increased that these impacts are devastating communities. So you want to make sure you have enough food and water to last on your own for up to 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Have a Noaa weather radio, that's going to be battery powered because you may lose power at your home, school, or business. But we have generator powers with the National Weather Service, as does City of Tampa and the counties across the area. So we're going to make sure that you have the information, but you have to make sure that you have multiple ways of receiving that information from us. So again, your cell phone is a great resource, but once the battery dies, hopefully you have either a generator or some type of cell phone charger. Another important thing is to make sure that you have enough medicine, enough cash on hand in order to survive, that period. But also is really to know what zone you actually live in. Do you live in an evacuation zone? Do you live in a flood zone? Because when you come out, Jane, you're going to be talking about evacuation orders, and we're going to be talking about the emergency planning group, and people want to make sure that they know where do they live now. A lot of people can't point on a map where they live, which is pretty common. But again, go to the City of Tampa website, and you go to county websites, enter in your zip code, and you can determine whether or not you live in an evacuation zone. And if you do, when the evacuation orders come out, make sure you get out. You do not want to be in the evacuation zone when a major hurricane comes our way. We'll talk about some of the hazards, but storm surge is something that you definitely want to get away from. And again, those are the main.
And so with that said, a lot of people think that it's the wind and for a hurricane, but really it's the storm surge that is the most damaging. I remember when Charlie was barreling down on us, that the indications were that if it hit us at high tide in a particular area where it just basically pulled all of the water in, that the storm surge would subside at the interstate. So, you think about that in South Tampa and the downtown area. So, the storm surge is really the most damaging, although clearly wind can be as well. But this year, every year, it's imperative that you heed the advice of the professionals. Clearly, it's not an exact science. You can't say that, yes, it will hit at this particular place at this particular moment. There's so many factors, as Brian has said, that go into that. But this year, we have the issue of COVID-19 as well. So we have to factor that in to, all of the locations where we are evacuating individuals to the storm shelters prior to. So when that evacuation hopefully will not be given, but if it's given, individuals need to heed it, and they need to heed it very early. So having a plan ahead of time, knowing what evacuation zone you reside in, and then just making that plan known to everybody in your family, friends, neighbors, making sure that you're looking out for them as well is critically important every year, but so much more so this year because of the added issues of COVID-19 and the ability for the cities and the counties to be able to safely take care of all of our residents. So it's I tell you what, this is the year that we definitely do not need any of these storms to be coming towards us. Talk just a little bit about what the storm surge did in Irma.
That's a good question. And I remember you and I were in meetings several years ago and talking about preparedness for the city of Tampa, from storm surge. And that is the number one killer. If you were to close your eyes right now and just kind of think about when you think of a hurricane, a lot of people think of the wind and definitely does a lot of destruction. However, the water is really the main killer. And that's why we always say that, folks need to, get out of the storm surge area. But during Hurricane Irma, a really good example, a few years ago, back in September, almost 3 years ago, coming up in a month now. But in any case, the water actually left Tampa Bay. If Irma had shifted a little bit, about 50 miles to the west, a little bit to the left, then it would have had a greater chance of coming right up our coastline, and about anywhere from 15 to 20 feet of water would have come into Tampa Bay and pretty much put everything underwater, Bayshore and Harbor Island, Davis Island, some of downtown Tampa, even portions of the southern runway of Tampa International Airport. So this is significant about what could happen to the city. But that storm shifted a little bit to the east, only about 50 miles. And so the circulation is counterclockwise. So again, low pressure in hurricanes is a counterclockwise circulation. So now imagine a hurricane to our right, or say over Winter Haven, over in Highlands County. And that counterclockwise, that northeast flow is going to be blowing over Tampa and Tampa Bay. And it was actually pushing out the water in the Gulf of Mexico. And there were many people that were walking out into Tampa Bay. We weren't recommending that. We were going on social media and telling people not to do that. There were manatees that were stuck out there, and Florida Fish and Wildlife were out there rescuing them with officials out there. But again, the water was actually leaving the bay. And that can happen when we have a strong northeast flow with tropical storms and hurricanes.
Yeah, and think about that. When you think about the accuracy of a storm prediction, 50 miles made the difference between the water being sucked out of the bay or, having a substantial amount of portion of our city 15 to 20 feet underwater. So it's not an exact science, so you need to listen, heed the warnings. So before we end our program today, I want to ask you a couple of questions. One is, do you still send people up in the airplanes, the storm trackers, and who volunteers to go up into that? That has got to be an incredibly bumpy ride to actually fly into a hurricane. Do they still do that?
They do, and I've actually been one, the P3 Hurricane Hunter. However, when I was in it, it went from Tampa International Airport to MacDill Air Force Base, so it was really good. Right.
It'd be the ride I'd volunteer for.
Exactly. But no, we have Noaa, which is the parent agency of the National Weather Service. We have an aircraft operations center. They used to be at MacDill Air Force Base, and now they're in Lakeland. So Lakeland has gotten the honor of having them out there. And so the Noaa Hurricane Hunters, their mission is to fly out there in the tropical storms and hurricanes and collect very valuable data. So much like what my office does and offices around the world, they release weather balloons, and the balloon goes up and collects data. When they're in the hurricane hunters, it'll be a P3 Orion aircraft, usually about 10,000 feet up. They'll be actually dropping down instruments into the storm and ahead of the storm. And we also have a Gulfstream 4 jet that will be flying well outside of the storm track, about anywhere from 30 to 40,000 feet up. And they're sampling the environment, the winds, the temperature, and humidity. And that data gets fed back into those computer models that help us forecast. So there's a lot of folks. In fact, someone who used to work at this office, Nikki Hathaway, who now works at the Aircraft Operations Center. She flew out there in a Hurricane Isaias. Many friends work out there in Lakeland, and they fly out there along with the U.S. Air Force, the C-130s that fly out there for a similar mission.
God bless them. All right, now, have you read the book, Eric Larson's book, Isaac Storm?
I have, and there's
a great book.
Award, an Isaac Klein Award that is, the National Weather Service has.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, that was a fascinating. I like Eric Larson, and that was one of the great books that he wrote, and talked about the devastation of a hurricane. Really changed the history for Galveston. So very interesting. All right, lastly, let's talk about, I brought this up. I had listened to a podcast on the way home from a long road trip, and they had in there, they called it, is it the Waffle House Index? What is it? Waffle House Factor or something along those lines?
Yeah,
So this is Craig Fugate was actually talking, and Craig Fugate used to work here locally in the Tampa Bay area. Then he was head of FEMA for the state of Florida, and then he was President Obama brought him in as the head of national FEMA, and he uh, he was talking about Waffle Houses and how they had gone out after a storm and the only thing that was open was a Waffle House. And he saw a sticker on one of the employees' cars that said something to the effect of Waffle House Emergency Response Team. So he's kind of joking with the guy, like, what's that all about? And he said, no, we really have an emergency response team. He said, we look at ourselves as being the neighborhood part of the community. And so if a storm or some other incident happens, we try to get back up and running as quickly as we possibly can. So we have generators brought in, food, whatever we can do. If something happens, we send a team down there with whatever's necessary to get that restaurant back up and operating. And so they developed some kind of a red, yellow, green system where if they went into an area and all the Waffle Houses were open, then it was green, they were doing okay. If it was yellow and they only had a partial menu, then it was like, okay, we'll need some resources and services here. And if they were all closed, then clearly that area had been hit particularly hard. But I thought that was entertaining that that actually was something that wasn't official on the part of Waffle House, but was used as sort of the index. According to Craig Fugate, the president asked him in his interview for the position, what is this with this Waffle House index or something like that? So he just jumped. But do you guys, I mean, is that something that you pay attention to, or is it just a way to sort of have fun in a very stressful situation?
I think a little bit of both. We don't run that with the National Weather Service. In fact, I got a chance to meet and talk with Craig Fugate underneath the wing of one of the Hurricane Hunter P3 aircrafts on the tarmac several years ago when he was still the FEMA administrator. But yeah, FEMA has used the Waffle House Index in a lot of county city emergency managers. It's a good indicator. In fact, I think some closed recently, not due to hurricanes, but
Uh,
going pandemic. But
we may have to adjust our adjust our process, our data gathering process.
it is a good indicator, and yeah, it's very interesting to see how many people follow that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for what you do all around, 365, but specifically right now during the hurricane season. And then we have, so many other storms that I was just in touch with the mayor from Chicago, and she said that it had been, this was 2 nights ago, that they had the high winds, electricity out, trees down, all of that, and went across Ohio, Illinois. So, a lot of locations that were hit by weather incidents other than hurricanes. So thank you for all you do to keep us informed and most importantly, to keep us safe.
All right, thank you, Mayor Castor, and thanks for the partnership over the years and for the focus on safety in Tampa. Thank you.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And I hope that you and our paths cross in the next few months, but not in association with a hurricane. That is my hope. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope that this was very informative. Again, remember, please wear a mask. That is the one action that you can take that will reduce the transmission of COVID-19 and also help you to avoid contracting it. So please remember, stay calm, be kind, and let's all stay healthy out there. Thank you all very, very much. Take care, Brian.
Thanks a lot.
See you.